Now, you told me at your residence today that your house had just been broken into. Can you tell me about that?
Okay. I had not gone to anyone for Thanksgiving. I am somewhat uncomfortable with other people's family holidays. So I was staying at home. And just because there wasn't anything big happening, I was in the basement in my favorite reading chair reading a paperback.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear someone rattling the upstairs door by the garage where everybody comes and goes. So I set down the book and I'm paying attention. And the chair is between the bookshelves. And I see a shadow go past the picture window. And then somebody's rattling the basement door trying to get in. But it also is locked and deadbolted. And then I see the shadow in front of the picture window for maybe half a minute or a minute, like they're trying to see what they can see inside. And I'm getting seriously stressed because somebody wants in and they're trying to sneak in, and it's happened before. It's about a minute of silence, and I hear a glass window broken. So I'm sitting there and I hear the steps come down the hallway, turn around and come down the stairs. These are people who've stolen my guns. I figure they're willing to use guns if they steal guns. And I decide that I've got a choice of either shooting or being shot. The guy came down the stairs and I shot him. And I hear more footsteps coming down the hallway. And somebody else starts down the stairs.
Mm-hmm.
So I killed her too.
Okay.
This is a police interrogation from 2012 of a man named Byron Smith. From just what we are listening to here, he appears to be a victim of a series of burglaries who had little choice but to defend himself from what could have been dangerous attackers. However, the further we delve into this, the more complicated it becomes. Byron Smith was an elderly retiree from the U.S. Department of State. He was living on his retirement in Little Falls, Minnesota. He didn't have many friends and kept to himself for the most part. He just wanted a peaceful retirement, but a difficult situation made this hard for him. Over the past few months, he had been repeatedly burglarized. Some of the items stolen included $4,000 in cash, his father's prisoner of war watch, and some guns. Despite getting the police involved, the thieves were not caught. As the robberies continued, Byron became more and more frustrated. He set up some cameras around his house in hopes of catching the criminals in the act. As time went on, he became more reclusive than usual, as he closely monitored the cameras waiting for something to happen. Then, on November 22nd, 2012, Thanksgiving Day, Byron decided to take things into his own hands. At around 11:25 in the morning, we can see Byron getting into his car and driving it off his property. About 20 minutes later, we see him come back to his house without his car and then re-enter the house from the back. He wanted it to seem like no one was home. At this point, he went into his basement where he sat down in this chair with a rifle and a pistol. Accompanying him was an audio recorder that he turned on to record the events that followed. At the beginning of the audio, we can hear him talking to himself. The first thing he mutters is, "In your left eye." He then begins foreshadowing his need for a lawyer.
I realize I don't have an appointment, but I would like to see one of the lawyers here.
At about noon, we can see that one of the intruders has just arrived. The boy we see here is Nicholas Brady, a 17-year-old kid who lived nearby. He spent some time wandering around the property, trying to get a look inside through the windows. He tries the back door, which is locked, and then he notices one of the cameras. He covers his face with his hoodie and knocks down one of the cameras before continuing to wander the property. The events that occur from here are captured only on Byron's audio recording. At first, we hear one of the windows to Byron's house being broken, followed by silence. few minutes later, footsteps can be heard entering the basement before we hear how Byron greeted his unwelcome visitor.
You're dead.
After taking care of the body, Byron sits down and continues to wait. About 10 minutes later, Nicholas's accomplice arrives. This girl is Haley Kiefer, 18 years old. Her and Nicholas were cousins. She entered the house, and as she walks into the basement, we hear her call out her cousin's name before she meets the same fate.
Oh, sorry about that.
Oh my god.
You're dying. Bitch.
A few minutes later, he realizes that Haley is still breathing, so he finishes her off with one more shot to the face. A later examination of the body shows that one of the gunshot wounds was to her left eye, which would explain the beginning of Byron's recording. The remainder of the recording includes Byron taunting the kids.
Cute. I'm sure she thought she was a real pro. They weren't human. I don't see them as human. I see them as vermin.
And at a later point, he starts talking to himself and doing what might be him rehearsing what he's going to say to the police.
I left my house at 11:30. They were both dead by 1. I refuse to live in fear.
After this, Byron moved the bodies into a corner of the basement, and he decided not to report the shooting to the police on that day. The next day at around noon, he calls his neighbor, Bill Anderson, and asks if he could call a lawyer down to his house. Unable to find a lawyer, he calls the police and sends them over instead. When the police arrive, Byron calmly lets them in and explains what he had done before showing them the bodies of the kids. From here, he was brought down to the station for questioning.
This is Sergeant Investigator Jeremy Liberts with the Morris County Sheriff's Office, and the date is 11/23/2012. The time right now is 14:59 hours. I'm currently in the interview room at the Morrison County Sheriff's Office, and currently present with me is Byron
David Smith.
Okay, hold on one second, Byron.
Okay.
Byron seems to have no problem talking to the police, and clearly believes what he did was self-defense. When he explains his version of events, it differs from what we heard on the audio recording.
So I killed her too.
Okay.
Same way, except the first shot she tumbled, and I walked over to finish her off. It was a new Mini 14 that I bought to replace the one that had been stolen, and it jammed. Trigger clicked and she laughed at me. I just pulled out the 22 and shot her and shot her. She laughed at me. And okay, there's another red button I guess most people would have. It's like if you're trying to shoot somebody and they laugh at you, you go again.
Later on in the interrogation, the detective pushes Byron a bit. He asks why he shot the girl again even after she was already down.
My question, Byron, is why did you shoot again? She didn't have a weapon in her hand. She wasn't.
Actually, I don't know if she had a weapon in her hand until
Okay.
later.
Okay.
I wasn't looking at her hands.
But she was laying there, hurt. Did she? She wasn't threatening you. I'm just. I have to
thought
ask.
she was threatening me.
Okay. Explain that to me.
I assumed she had a gun,
Okay.
either inside something or in the purse or in her hand or whatever. And I'm not going to wait for her to. I'm not going to ask her if she has a gun.
Right. Understandable. Okay.
I'm not going to wait until she shows it, or if I if she uses it while I'm looking for it.
Okay.
I had already determined that both of them, I knew they were both gun thieves. As far as I was concerned, they were totally dangerous.
He continues by asking why he didn't call the cops immediately after the shooting.
Why didn't you call law enforcement to report what happened?
Byron gave a few different answers to this, including him being in shock and worrying about another accomplice being on the way, but the most bizarre of the reasons he listed was that he didn't want to ruin the police's Thanksgiving.
It seems sort of irrational now, but just because my Thanksgiving's screwed up, I don't need to screw up yours.
Okay.
Given the circumstances, things were not looking good for Byron. He was charged with murder, and on April 21st, 2014, his trial began. The case sparked a debate over the castle doctrine, which gives a homeowner the right to use lethal force to protect themselves from an intruder. The prosecutor argued that this did not fall under self-defense because Byron purposefully set a trap for these kids. He moved his car out of his driveway to make it look like no one was home in hopes of luring them in. And even when the threat was neutralized, Byron used excessive force by continuing to shoot. When the prosecutor played the audio recording of the events for the jury, Byron stood no chance. He was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Even to this day, there are still people out there who insist Byron is not in the wrong, and these kids just shouldn't have robbed him. Obviously what the kids did was wrong, but Byron clearly took this way too far. He definitely was not in fear of his life, because if he was, then he wouldn't have tried to lure them in the first place. And he could have easily had the police on the phone the second he saw the kids making another break-in attempt on his surveillance cameras. It's crazy because if it weren't for that audio recording, he might have actually been able to get away with this. He sealed his own fate. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the flip side.